I think for the most part, everybody knows and likes the technique of weighing a spool on a scale and subtracting the weight of the spool and determining how much filament you have left. But I find it super, I'm going to say, inconvenient to pull my spool off when I'm down to the last few turns or when I can see the inner core, because I know when I pull it away from my machine, I have the filament strung out, I'm losing a significant portion of what's left in the air. Putting it on a scale, there's some pulling, it's just fumbling around. And so I started just counting the turns. Count the turns on the spool. So in this case, I think 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 turns of filament left on the spool. I know now that on this large 3 kilogram spool with a 150 millimeter core diameter here, each turn represents 1.4 grams of filament. So 12 times 1.4, I've got about 17 grams of filament there. Super convenient for me to be able to just glance at the end of a spool on a machine and know, okay, I got 17 grams, I can run a small part through there and finish up this spool. Yeah, so on this spool I've got 19 turns left, and that tells me I've got about 23 grams of filament there, which is super helpful when I go to my slicer and decide what I'm going to put through into this printer. And you can apply it to any filament size, but it is worth noting that, of course, when you have lots of layers there, you can't use this technique. So when I have that much, I generally don't care, because I know it's a lot of filament. I can estimate that's half a spool or a third of a spool or whatever. And even though I have filament sensors, I know when it stops. It's just inconvenient if it stops in the middle of a print. I'd rather know. Even if I know I'm going to stop in the middle of a print and transition to a new roll, knowing there's 17 grams of filament, I can predict about how much print time I have before I need to pop back to the machine and swap on the new spool. So I made a spreadsheet. It's not complicated, but I made a spreadsheet to make it easier, and I also just made a little matrix of all the different materials, how much one turn of filament weighs on different spool sizes, because of course the bigger the diameter, the more filament in one turn. So I just keep those handy here, and when I'm printing I can quickly glance and count how many turns are left on here while it's on the machine. I took this off just for demonstration purposes, but for when it's on the machine is when this really matters, and you can quickly see how much filament's left and know kind of where you're at. This is the calculator, and I think it should be pretty straightforward. I've kind of numbered it for the sequence, but basically enter in the number of turns that you've counted on your spool. I'm just going to put in 1 here for this demonstration because I think it's useful. Actually, no, let's put in 10 and we'll go back to 1. A pull down menu for the different materials, which reference the material properties, material densities. That is another table I'll show you in a second. Your choice of filament sizes. So these probably you're going to stay fairly constant if you're printing, let's say, PLA, and you're using a 1.75 millimeter filament. And then your spool diameter, and a lot of them are in and around 90 millimeters. You just type in whatever it is, so pick your spool diameter, and the result is this. So if you have 50 turns, you have 41 grams. If you have 1 turn, you have 0.8 grams. So for the most part, all you need to do is put in your number of turns in here, and out comes your amount of filament. I did hide a couple of rows that may be interesting to some people. This is the density of the material that's coming from the materials property table, which I'll get to. And here is the length remaining. So for example, if you have 1 turn of filament on an 88 millimeter spool, then you have 27.6 centimeters of filament. I was kind of surprised how much filament goes around 1 turn of the spool, so it's quite interesting. But ultimately, in the end of the day, you don't need those, so I'll just hide them again, and that's it. I'll show you the reference table next. Ultimately, this is really the only thing you need. Print it out, keep it near your printer, and then all you have to do is look up your whatever row represents the filament type you're using, and column for your spool diameter. Let's say you're on PLA on a 90 millimeter spool, then it's 0.84 grams per turn of filament. And so if you have 10 turns, you've got 8 grams, etc. You can customize your filament's diameter here and the common spool sizes you're encountering. These are typical of what I'm using. And so, yeah, with this handy, you can just quickly look up any material and do a little math in your head or on your phone, and you can see how much filament you have remaining. The calculator is great because you can get precision, but it means having a computer nearby. Yeah, I recommend print this out, adjust it to what you need, and then print it out. This is a table that shows the material densities for most of the common printing materials, as you can see over on the left here. And the sources I got them had a range of densities, so I picked the lower end, which is why this column's in bold. And using that means that you'll always probably have actually more filament when you calculate how much filament you have than you thought. So in other words, you won't be overestimating, you'll be underestimating, which is usually a good thing, but it'll be so negligible it doesn't really matter. So those are there. And if you download this and want to adjust them, you find it's not coming out perfectly for you, then you can just go change the numbers in any of these or all of these, and that will then reflect onto the reference table and in the calculator. So yeah, I find that super helpful. It doesn't stop me from weighing my spools and all that, but this is when you're down to the end and you got a little bit on there and you're just wondering, am I going to finish the print or can I run a print? You can quickly quantify how much filament you have there. So hopefully that's useful, and yeah,